Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is Ether Amaga. So in today's live video, I'm going to be doing a follow-up from a video topic that I was planning to introduce kind of in tandem with another topic that I had here on my channel discussing the toxic girlhood, the toxic feminine, and how that really plays a role in the decline in our daughters' kind of social spaces, in their love lives, and in the acceptance being in faith spaces, so on and so forth. So, I'm going to go in and I'm going to just discuss some points that I wanted to really focus on. As a lot of people know here on my channel, I am a single mom, and specifically to a daughter, and trying to get a good foundation and understanding of what prejudice looks like, what racism looks like, and how to identify those things in their friendships. Specifically, in this previous video, it was geared towards understanding that even in faith spaces, being a Black Muslim, how a lot of our stories are very different than the average community member. A lot of us deal with different forms of prejudice, different forms of racism, and it can show up in very different ways. So, this video is just to really share how important it is to cultivate love within our daughters, because when they go into these different spaces, there is going to be, a need for self love and acceptance that will allow them not to change who they are or to assimilate to another person in order to be desired in love or to be wanted to be accepted in sister circles. I think it's just really important for us as moms within this diaspora to really pour a lot of love into our daughters more than what, you know, has been shown in mothership within the diaspora for our daughters, and a lot of those connections being broken, moms not really paying attention to what girls are really dealing with, even in girl spaces. I feel like there's an overhaul of, talking about what boys shouldn't be doing to you, and how, men can be a detriment to you, and how to be, safe away from men. But then we don't recognize that even in girl spaces, there is a lot of nastiness, there is a lot of cattiness, there is a lot of abuses that go on in girl spaces that I feel as a mom is really important to talk about. I think a lot of dads don't really understand girl spaces. I don't think they really understand the underlying telltale signs of female on female abuse. So I think it's really important for us in the diaspora to really um, give our daughters the foundation. There's a book here that I'm going to kind of be drawing contrast from over this topic. And this book here is called Nurture by Nature. And this is, a book that helps you to understand your child's personality type and to how you can become a better parent. And, how that correlates with, self love, and how our children perceive their experiences in different spaces. I think understanding what type of mindset our children, create for themselves when they don't understand something is very important, because a lot of our, daughters, as you can see, within the diaspora, it's very much more on social media. They acquire these thoughts and these ideas about acceptance and what acceptance looks like. And I think it's a very skewed sense of acceptance. I feel like there are a lot of girls who will go completely outside of their own comfort to be accepted. I think that is really, attributed to not really knowing what the telltale signs of prejudices are or stereotypes are for us as African American women, Black women, melanated women, wherever you want to call yourself in this diaspora specifically. I know what my trajectory is and who I'm talking to as a single mom to a Black child. This is something that is very important for us to instill in our daughters, because there's just so much of an influx of black girls being hypersexualized, and that hypersexual activity is flowing into their everyday lives, and it is becoming something that is estimated to be your culture. I think, you know, a lot of people have used these sets of stereotypes to kind of diminish the innocence of a black girl. You know, it's like in order to connect with you, people kind of try to assert their view of what they think you are in a lewd way, or, you know, thinking that you like certain things that are a stereotype that may not really be connected to you as a person. And I think, you know, leading into the temperaments of children and understanding how they perceive things. I think, you know, if we can, as moms, really instill a thinking sense in our daughters to understand, like, what do you think about this? Do you think that that's who you are? Do you think that that's how you want to be treated? Do you want to be, you know, put into this box where people perceive you to be a very, um, you know, as they say in childhood, you're a fast girl, or, you know, do you think that that is a part of your character? Like, is that who you are, or is that what people want you to be in order for them to not have to really get to know you? I feel like there's just so much when it comes to critical thinking that needs to be placed into our children, our daughters specifically, because just looking at the, you know, the influx and how many black girls are going missing um, off of social media, and in places where they are in chat rooms with people who they think are for them. I think it's very important to pay attention to why is it that they are so easy to fall for the okey doke when it comes to how these people are, you know, engaging them in. You know, they're engaging in this stereotype culture, and they're asserting themselves as, yeah, you know, you like certain things. Look at this. You know, it's like a candy being given to a child, but the candy is not in literal sense anymore. It is this stereotype that they are hyper fixating on has become accepted, or, you know, internalized by our daughters, and they are going with people who have sold it back to them and thinking, yeah, this is who I am, yeah, I think that's cool, yeah, that's fun, yeah, let's do it, let's go. And they're not realizing that they are falling into a trap. And I feel like that's why there are so many girls who are just lost in thinking that this is what they're supposed to accept of themselves. And when it comes to faith spaces, I think it's definitely a detriment for them because, you know, as I've kind of experienced and, you know, kind of heard from people, you know, outside of our diasporas about what is acceptable and what is attractive and what is, you know, wife material for specific types of Muslim men, black women are not on the table for any of these things. And I feel like it is very interesting to look at and understand, like, are we truly accepted here in this ummah, or are we just a secondary kind of thought, like, oh yeah, it's cool that you're here, but nobody's ever going to want to be with you because of who you are. And I think it's very hard to accept that fact when it comes to our daughters, you know, when they decide they want to walk into certain faith spaces, and understanding, like, is this what acceptance calls for? You know, me being told that, you know, I'm not going to be married to a certain type of person because of the type of hair texture that I have, or because of the perception that, oh, having long hair is more attractive, and because your hair doesn't fit a certain type of standard, that you are off the table completely when it comes to being loved. You know, I think it is a very toxic thing that goes on even within faith spaces when it comes to how they tear down black girls and how they try to use, you know, the word of God to overinflate that sense of separatist nature in our black daughters. And I think it really does a lot of harm. And I'm definitely somebody who pays attention to, you know, kind of the heat of the moments and understanding, like, what is it that, you know, people are trying to get from making us the undesirables. Why is it such an overhaul to make us feel like we're undesirable? You know, um, especially considering, you know, wearing a hijab, you know, people see fabric and they automatically assume that, oh, is this your hair, like what's underneath there, they're not worried about other people of other cultures when it comes to what their hair looks like. It's specifically us. Is your hair going to be enough for a husband? Is your hair texture going to be attractive to a man? Like, I feel like limiting the experiences of black girls down to what your hair looks like underneath that hijab is the most toxic thing that you can spew out of your mouths when it comes to spaces where we're not even supposed to be worried about hair. Hijab is supposed to be to conceal. So worrying about what's underneath it is a complete fallacy. And I think that it is definitely something that needs to change in these spaces, because it definitely creates a rift when it comes to sistership and understanding how a lot of women will fuel their sons with this hatred, telling them you should marry somebody who's more like this, you should marry somebody who has more hair like this, their texture of hair should be more like this, and separating themselves from even, like, you don't always have to be attracted to everyone and everything in order to treat them like a human. So it's like, okay, you cannot be attracted to a certain type of person and a certain type of feature and look without tearing down another person and telling them that they will never marry because of what they look like or what their hair texture looks like. So I think that's something that we have to prepare our daughters for when it comes to going into faith spaces, because this is something that is a natural, everyday thing. Women are fueling their sons with this, and then when women like us come into their spaces, I always keep this thought in my mind: you fuel your sons with nastiness. How do you accept me when you're telling your son that we are not the desirables? Is that an authentic relationship to have, or sistership to have, with someone who in secrecy is tearing us down and then comes and acts like they care for us in our experiences when they tell their sons a completely different story? I think it's just a really harsh reality to recognize when you are in spaces that who we are at our core is never going to be accepted. And with that, how do we move through creating those critical thinking skills in our daughters to say, if something's not for me, then let's go find what is for me. Let's go into a different space and figure out what is going to work for me, instead of allowing it to tear you down and to change yourself, and people thinking that, oh, well, because you have long fabric on, you must want to have long hair. You don't have the right to assert your views to someone because of what their head looks like. So I think it's just a lot of things that we have to instill in our daughters. That way they're not, you know, um, having mixed feelings on their own hair. Like, it's always something that we have to talk about in the diaspora is hair. And our hair, there isn't a problem with it. And I'm someone who advocates for our right to be, and making sure that you don't connect with people who don't believe in that you know, beauty standard is not a linear thing. It's not one way. We can all have beauty in our own way. What you're not attracted to doesn't mean that the next person isn't attracted to it. So I think that, like I said here, I'm kind of looking at this temperament chart. It's a temperament chart, just kind of understanding how tempered we can, teach our daughters to be when it comes to these types of topics. And when it comes up, how are they going to navigate it? Like I said, really stimulating the thinking mind, thinking about, how does this make me feel when someone tells me that I won't be married because of what my hair looks like? What does that stir up in you? What does that tell you about yourself and your worth? Do you think that those are sisters that you want to be around, that you want to share moments with and share time with and pray with, when in the background they really have some type of prejudice against you, specifically based out of hair type? I think also stimulating the sensing self when you go into spaces and it's not readily on the table and it's not something that is on a sign that says they don't like something. How can we stimulate their senses to really pay attention to the small things that people do and say that will become a larger issue? I think it's really important to, like I said, stimulate the thinking self and the sensing self. Can I sense what the vibe is of this room before I get into it, and understand, like, this might not be the place for me? I think those are traits that are really important to instill into Black girls. I think there's, like I said, there's just so much assimilation to everything that everybody else wants you to be. Just like with, the beauty standard of Black women and this wig culture. I've heard a lot, even specifically within the faith community, about how people are using religion to shame women with certain types of hair and telling them that if you wear wigs, or if you don't have your real hair, or you have any type of synthetic hair connected to your hair, you are a sinner. You are going to go to hell if you don't repent from the sin of wearing synthetic hair or attachments to your hair. So I think it is things like that that make people um, feel like they have the right to use those judgments in faith spaces, when that's not what we're there for. We're not there to chastise people over what God created. And I feel like if you have a problem with what God created, then you have to take that up with your creator, instead of taking it out on other people because you don't understand his creation. And to question his creation is to question God as a whole anyway, and that's a personal problem. So our daughters do not deserve to be treated disrespectfully. They don't deserve to be put in a category of the undesirables. And it's not fair that we have to fight harder to be accepted in spaces where that is the consensus of belief. So I think it's really important um, to instill in our daughters how to really be a thinker. That's definitely something that I am working on with my daughter. We are at a stage in her life where she's starting to understand the differences when it comes to hair, understanding the differences when it comes to, like when we're preparing her hair, and how different it is, and how it takes a little bit more time, how it takes more time to detangle, how, tedious it is, and understanding like, oh my goodness, like it's just so much to do my hair. Like, why can't my hair just be like something else? And it's like, it doesn't need to be like something else, because God created you to be as complex as you are, and it's okay. You don't have to resort to these systems of thought and belief where it makes you feel like, well, why can't my hair be straight like this? God didn't create it to be that way, and that's okay. Don't question what God created. Accept what He created and move past it. So I think that there is a lot of things like that that go on in communities that are kind of unspoken, if it's not, loudly spoken. And it's definitely something to teach girls, Black girls in general, to pay attention to. Don't change yourself. Don't create sisterships with people who are not authentically connected to humanity, like being a human. And making sure that you don't expend your energy over things like what your hair looks like, or what's on your head. You must wear something over your head because you hate your hair so much. Like, I've heard so many different things. Just because your fabric is long on your head, you must think that that's your hair. Like, there's just things that I ignore because it is based out of ignorance, and it is willful ignorance. So just making sure that our daughters understand when these things come about, just use your thinking mind. What do I think about this, and how am I going to react to it? Or am I just gonna, separate myself from the ignorant? I think that separation is the best tool, instead of, internalizing it and reacting over it. So this is definitely a topic that, like I said, in various videos here, will be a part of this series of the toxic feminine, and how it plays into religious spaces, how it plays into girls' friendships, how it plays into the abuses that Black girls are dealing with when it comes to other women, because women play a huge role in the tearing down of Black girls, and it starts from childhood. Whether it's a teacher in school who is treating a Black girl differently because of their hair, or taking your child to a daycare and someone takes their hair out and tries to change their hair or do their hair like someone else when their hair is not the same and it's not meant to be the same. It's things like that that we have to pay attention to, because overstepping the boundaries of a child is not ever respectful in any kind of way. And the women who engage in things like that are criminals, and they need to be brought to justice, because our children do not deserve to have your hands on them anywhere in their head, anywhere on them, or anywhere at all ever. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it 2 thumbs up. I will definitely be following up on this topic, as it is definitely something that is very deep and important to me as a single mom of a Black child who I have instilled with spiritual reverence and love and acceptance of self. And I will definitely be bringing more of these topics here in the coming new series of these topics here. Thank you so much for watching.